The fourth lunar mission began as a backup for Chang'e 3.
A Chinese spaceship is bound for the moon.
China's Chang'e 5 probe has successfully landed on the moon.
The United States just watched China's lunar probe return to Earth with samples from the far side of the moon, a historic first. Not just that, China's launching a staggering 100 space missions this year, smashing its own record. But their most alarming achievement? Well, China has launched a new giant space station, shocking the US. Elon Musk recently got an exclusive look inside China's orbital marvel and came back with a chilling warning. It's not good. So what did he see that has people scrambling? The rise of China's space ambitions. Let's rewind to a simpler time, the 1970s. While Americans were still basking in the glory of the Apollo 11 moon landing, China had quietly launched its first satellite, Dongfeng Hong 1. It wasn't anything that seemed major, but it had one unmistakable message, broadcasting a patriotic anthem on repeat from orbit. The East is red, almost like a signal flare to the rest of the world saying that we're coming. At the time, not many took it seriously. China wasn't even in the conversation, and while the US and the Soviet Union were making big strides in the space race, China's space efforts looked like background noise. But behind the scenes, something was building, slowly, steadily, and completely out of view from most of the West. Fast forward to the 90s. China's patience started to pay off. They built an entire national infrastructure for space development almost from scratch. The China National Space Administration was established, along with the China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation, which became the engine behind China's rocket and satellite development. The surprising bit is that they were banned from working with NASA because of geopolitical concerns. The Wolf Amendment made sure of that. But instead of complaining, they doubled down on going solo. Could it be that the United States knew China would be a future threat all along? And then came the rockets. Their Long March series of launch vehicles quickly evolved into one of the most reliable rocket families in the world. Each launch refined the process. Every success was another brick in the foundation. While the United States shifted focus and Russia clung to aging systems, China started climbing, with zero fanfare. And the moment that proved they weren't just experimenting anymore? When Shenzhou 5 aboard with astronaut Yang Liwei made a trip to orbit. This trip, which happened in October of 2003, made China rise in the ranks and become the third country to independently send a human into orbit with no borrowed tech, no international help, just their own will and engineering strength. And from then on, China did not slow down. Fast forward to 2013, China achieved the title of the third country to soft land on the moon with its Chang'e 3 mission now. The mission didn't simply make a landing, but rather rolled out a rover, the U-2, that was going to lead the way for China to make great discoveries. After 6 years, Chang'e 4 made an achievement no other agency was ready for. The Chang'e 4 landed on the far side of the moon. Think about that for a second. What does that actually mean? So, while every other space agency was playing it safe and sticking to the familiar side, China was ready to explore the dark side of the moon, going into the unknown. By the time 2021 rolled around, China had Mars in its sights. And it wasn't merely launching a probe like Europe had done. China went big with Tiangong, a full orbital and surface mission. Only 1 year after it was launched, the Zhurong rover drove onto Martian ground, making China only the second nation in history, following the United States, to land and run a rover on Mars successfully. No crashes, no malfunctions, just clean execution. At this point, The rest of the world had no choice but to take them seriously. But then came their most bold move yet, their own space station. Because they're not allowed on the International Space Station, China simply went ahead and constructed one of their own. It's named Tiangong, or Heavenly Palace, and it's not some makeshift orbital station. As of 2022, it's a complete modular rotating crew station with sophisticated scientific labs and closed-loop life support systems. The main module, Tianhe, is surrounded by Wentian and Mengtian, each configured for particular research purposes. The layout echoes the International Space Station, but make no mistake, it is a statement. We don't need you. We've got our own palace in the sky now. From Heavenly Palace to Mars, China's next frontier. Inside Tiangong, astronauts conduct experiments in zero gravity, study biological systems, and run high-tech physics trials. A giant, Hubble-class space telescope, Juntian, is set to launch by 2026 to operate alongside it. Unlike Hubble, which requires maintenance missions, this one is designed to dock with Tiangong for in-orbit servicing. Yes, they're thinking that far ahead. And now, we hit the twist. Elon Musk, yes, the guy behind the Falcon 9, Starlink, and the Mars-ready Starship, has his own thoughts on China's space ambitions. Musk is known for speaking his mind, and in 2023, Musk, in a response to a tweet by former Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield, tweeted that China's space program is far more advanced than most people realize. Let that sink in. The man who's convinced humanity must colonize space to survive, the guy building reusable rockets and dreaming of Mars cities, is telling people that China isn't just watching the space race, but is an active contender. And the sheer speed of China's space program proves him right. In just 2 decades, they've gone from launching their first astronaut to having their own space station. Or maybe it's their moon plans. Yes, they're already mapping a permanent base at the lunar South Pole, scheduled to begin construction with Russia in the 2030s. They're calling it the International Lunar Research Station, and it's designed for long-term habitation, mining, and deep space staging. The lunar South Pole area is full of water ice, an important resource that can be processed into drinking water, oxygen that can be breathed, or even rocket propellant. Having a presence there is not just for the sake of science, it's for establishing a foot in the door towards greater space exploration and long-term strategic influence. China openly declared it was planning to have the core part of this moon base under construction by 2030. Success would mean its first-ever permanent lunar station, and the first-ever non-Western power leadership over such an operation. And here's the kicker. They're not stopping at the moon. By 2033, China wants to send humans to Mars. Not just a stunt mission, a full-scale long-term colonization plan. Subsequent launches are scheduled every 2 years after that to build up infrastructure. Do you know who else has a plan like that? Elon Musk. So when he says China's progress is far more advanced, it's not just a throwaway comment, it's a signal. The race to Mars might already be on, and SpaceX isn't the only contender anymore, but the ambition doesn't stop there. China is also setting its sights on Jupiter. Yeah, Jupiter. In the early 2030s, they're planning to launch a mission to the gas giant and its icy moons, which scientists believe may harbor subsurface oceans and maybe even life. It's a bold move, but it fits the pattern. In silence, in shadows, China's not just playing catch-up. They're setting their own course, and it's pointed straight at the stars. And while most of this effort is scientific on the surface, it's hard not to notice the strategic undercurrent. Additionally, in 2023, China transferred its entire space program to the direct control of the Central Military Commission, the same entity that controls the country's military. That change wasn't merely bureaucratic. It officially positioned space as a national security domain where civilian innovation and military goals are fully integrated. And then there's the Belt and Road Initiative, which has extended into space. China is now providing satellite services, building launch infrastructure, and training personnel for partner nations, especially in Africa, South America, and parts of Asia. These partnerships are deepening global reliance on Chinese space systems, giving Beijing diplomatic leverage and influence over space norms and standards. And in recent years, China has made it very clear they're not content with playing catch-up with the rest of the world, especially America. They want to lead, and their moves in orbit are starting to show just how serious that ambition is. As of early 2025, China controls over 100 large, sophisticated satellites. These aren't just communications tools or weather monitors. Most belong to cutting-edge programs such as Gaofen and Yaogan, which are designed for high-resolution imaging, real-time monitoring, and Earth observation that can trivially double as military intelligence capabilities. With these satellites as eyes in the sky, China has developed a strong web of capabilities that can monitor troop movements, naval deployments, and economic activity around the world. But it's not just about having satellites, it's about what those satellites can do. China, in January 2024, had sent up Shijian-25, a satellite that is in orbit refueling capable. That is, they can now refuel satellites when they're still in orbit, significantly increasing their lifespan and lowering the necessity of continuous replacement. The United States first demonstrated something similar back in 2020 with Northrop Grumman's MEV-1, but China's pace and intent in scaling this tech have been striking. Why does that matter? Because satellite longevity and maneuverability directly impact strategic advantage. A nation that can service and adapt its space assets on the fly has a significant edge, especially during times of geopolitical tension or armed conflict. China is also investing in stealth satellite technology. That includes radar-absorbing materials, heat-masking systems, and non-traditional orbital patterns to avoid detection. The concept is straightforward. If an adversary can't trace a satellite, then they can't know what it's doing and how to block it. It adds an entirely new dimension to space monitoring, and it's forcing other countries to reconsider their space monitoring apparatus. Space dominance isn't just about exploration anymore. It's about power, resources, defense, and influence. And with its sprawling Earth observation satellites, deep space ambitions, and growing astronaut corps, China's making one thing clear. This is only the beginning. So maybe the question isn't, can the United States keep up? Maybe it is something far more urgent. Has the United States already fallen behind? The vision of space through the lens of the United States. So where is the United States in the ongoing space race? Can the vision of space dominance be won by the United States? Or is China a greater threat than thought before? Well, from the start of the space race, it can clearly be seen how the United States isn't just participating in the space race, it's redefining it. From the moment Neil Armstrong first stepped onto the lunar surface in 1969, to the cutting-edge rocket landings of SpaceX in the 2020s, America's presence in space has been one that simply cannot be ignored. It is complicated and ever-evolving. Now, with both NASA and private players like Elon Musk's SpaceX chasing the stars with a new intensity, the United States stands at a turning point in its space legacy, one that could lead to a new era of lunar living and human footprints in outer space. Let us rewind a bit. In the golden era of space exploration during the 1960s, NASA was on top. It was basically untouchable. The Apollo missions, to be precise Apollo 11,
Oh, geez, that's great. Is the lighting halfway decent?
Yes, indeed. They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the lunar surface.
Up now, and you can see the stars and stripes.
weren't just scientific milestones. Rather, they were cultural moments that showed how far America had reached during the Cold War. Even during times of war and chaos, the United States was ahead in innovation. And the space race wasn't about tourism or even exploration back then. It was a matter of showing dominance and strength. And when America landed on the moon, it was clear that they had won. But after that spectacular high, something unexpected happened. The drive seemed too slow. The Apollo program wrapped up in the early 70s, and with it went some of the momentum. NASA then shifted its focus to more sustainable missions that were closer in orbit to home, and the Space Shuttle program began in the early 80s. Now, while those missions were impressive and big steps in the right direction, the big dreams like establishing moon bases, Mars landings, interplanetary colonies, and more began to fade into the background. Space started to look like a government project, not a frontier. For decades, America's space ambitions were locked in low Earth orbit. That all started to change in the early 2000s. Enter Elon Musk, one of the leading minds of the United States and the space race. Unlike other Silicon Valley success stories, Musk had a very different post-dot-com dream. He wanted to go to Mars. Now, the story of SpaceX began in 2002, but that was only when the theory of it was realized. The conception of the idea came much earlier than that. By the late 1990s, Elon had already made a name for himself because of his contributions to companies like PayPal and Zip2. But that window of fame and success only led to a desire for far greater, a desire to make space travel affordable and eventually colonize the Red Planet. That wasn't just marketing hype. Musk genuinely believed and still believes that humanity's survival depends on becoming a multi-planetary species. SpaceX's early days were a roller coaster. They started small, working on a rocket called the Falcon 1. But getting to space is brutal, especially if you're trying to innovate with limited money and zero track record. The first 3 Falcon 1 launches failed spectacularly. By 2008, Musk was nearly out of money, and SpaceX was on the verge of collapse. Then came the 4th launch, and it worked. Falcon 1 reached orbit, making SpaceX the first privately funded company to pull off a feat once reserved only for governments. That single successful launch changed everything. Not long after, NASA took a bet on this scrappy startup and signed a $1.6 billion contract with SpaceX to deliver cargo to the International Space Station. That deal was not just about funding, it was a huge endorsement. NASA had just tapped a private company to handle missions the agency used to do itself. The old guard was teaming up with the new school. From there, things took off, literally. SpaceX introduced the Falcon 9, a powerful rocket that quickly became the workhorse of American spaceflight. Then came the Dragon capsule, which became the first private spacecraft to dock with the International Space Station in 2012. After which, the Falcon Heavy stole the spotlight when it debuted in 2018. Remember that Tesla Roadster flying through space with a mannequin in the driver's seat? Yeah, that was Musk making a statement. This isn't just science fiction anymore. But what really changed the game was Crew Dragon. In 2020, it took NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley.
All right, we have stage separation confirmed. The first stage beginning its flight back. The second stage, being powered by that single Merlin 1D vacuum engine, has ignited.
To the International Space Station, the first private spacecraft to launch humans into orbit. With the launch, the United States once again had the capability to launch astronauts from American soil, something it had not done since the shuttles stopped flying in 2011. Meanwhile, SpaceX has been looking far beyond Earth's orbit. Their biggest project to date is Starship, a fully reusable, ultra-heavy launch system designed to take humans to the Moon, Mars, and maybe beyond. It's massive, sleek, and wildly ambitious. Starship is designed to carry up to 100 people, which is unheard of in modern spaceflight. And while its test flights have not all gone smoothly, some ended in fiery explosions.
Yeah, it does appear to be spinning, but I do want to remind everyone that everything after clearing the tower was icing on the cake.
But each one gets closer to that elusive goal, making interplanetary travel possible. NASA isn't sitting idle either. While SpaceX gets the headlines, NASA is working on one of its most significant programs in decades, the Artemis program. Inspired by Apollo's twin sister in Greek mythology, Artemis is all about going back to the moon, but this time, it's not a flyby. Artemis is about building a long-term presence. Artemis II, scheduled for 2026, will send astronauts around the moon. Then Artemis III, aiming for 2027, will actually land them near the lunar South Pole, a location scientists are eyeing for future lunar bases because of its water ice deposits. And for the first time in history, the crew will include a woman and a person of color. NASA is working with commercial partners like SpaceX, which is providing a version of Starship as the lunar lander to make this happen. The plan is not just to visit. NASA hopes to leverage the moon as a stepping stone for missions to Mars. That's where this gets most intriguing. Whereas Elon Musk wants to fast forward and establish Martian cities as soon as possible, NASA envisions the moon as a testing ground, a place to experiment with technologies, habitats, and life support systems. Both routes may ultimately meet, but presently, they're working toward the same cosmic objective in different ways. However, it's not smooth sailing all the way. The Artemis mission has incurred severe cost overruns and delays in scheduling. Some critics fear that without ongoing political and financial backing, it could run out of steam. Elon Musk has even publicly criticized the moon-first approach as a waste, suggesting that we target Mars directly. But for NASA, Artemis is about building infrastructure, such as learning to survive off the land, otherwise known as in situ resource utilization, which will be essential for surviving on the surface of Mars one day. There's also the changing role of the International Space Station. The International Space Station has been orbiting Earth for over 2 decades, but it's aging. It won't last forever. NASA plans to transition operations to private space stations over the next decade, and companies like Blue Origin and Axiom Space are racing to fill that gap. The expectation is that these new orbital platforms will be commercial centers, research bases, and jumping-off points for the rest of the solar system. And where has this left us? We are currently in the midst of one of the most thrilling periods in space exploration after Apollo. And the United States is out front again, but differently so. This time, it isn't just NASA holding the rocket keys. Space is becoming a public-private collaboration, with companies like SpaceX providing the tech muscle and NASA offering the mission know-how and scientific backbone. And that combo is working. America has proven that it can land on the moon. It has also proven that private companies can send astronauts to space. The question now is, can America sustain it? Because space is hard, technology ages quickly, missions get delayed, funding priorities shift with every election cycle. But if America is to continue leading the world in space, and not merely sit back while nations such as China develop their own space stations and moon initiatives, it will have to keep inventing and keep investing. That means pressing on with both government programs like Artemis and commercial ventures like Starship. The dream of a lunar base, or even a self-sustaining Martian colony, may still be years away, but it's closer than it's ever been. And for the first time in decades, it feels like America is not just looking at the stars. It is actually heading there. The only question now is, will the United States momentum be enough to hold off rising powers like China? Or are we about to witness the greatest space showdown in history? Who will dominate space? The United States versus China. The true struggle for dominance is not about who can send up the most satellites, it's about who can dominate orbital space. Currently, the United States is in the lead, but China is close behind, and the issue of who will prevail may decide the course of space exploration, communications, and even war. China's satellite initiatives, in combination with its transparency deficit and its rocket stage disposal methods, have been alarming to space analysts and global actors. In regard to the future of space, most are worried that China's methods could lead to dangerous precedents. China's rocket stage issue is one major aspect that could easily undermine China's ambition. The issue at hand is that the Chinese rockets used for satellite launches leave behind debris that could linger in space for decades. For example, China's Long March rockets are observed to leave unmanageable rocket stages in orbit, and these junk pieces can remain up there for more than 100 years. This gives way to the threat of future collisions and cluttering of space. So, if China is to continue with this approach while it expands its satellite constellation, then it simply paves the way for an incredibly dangerous orbital environment, one that impacts other nations' access to space as well. But again, China is not without its competitors. SpaceX, the private space venture headed by Elon Musk, has already launched thousands of satellites for its Starlink constellation. SpaceX is working on its own plans to expand into space, hoping to provide global internet coverage and be involved in future space exploration missions. Starlink, with almost 6,700 satellites in orbit, has also come under fire for its role in space junk and for its ability to interfere with astronomical observations. But SpaceX deploys Falcon 9 rockets capable of controlled re-entry, minimizing the amount of space junk left behind, an improvement over China's current practices. But let's not be fooled by the Starlink network as an all-good-faith endeavor. SpaceX's domination of the commercial satellite launch market is a transparent bid to become an integral part of the future of space. With the number of satellites it's launching, SpaceX is making a big bid for dominance over orbital space, particularly in terms of communications. SpaceX's constellation is already providing internet services to remote and underserved communities around the world, and the company is in no hurry to stop. It intends to launch thousands more satellites, with the hope of covering the world with high-speed internet and spreading its reach into space exploration and world connectivity. But China is nowhere near retreating. The nation's vision for space dominance is not merely about infrastructure or economic gains. China's expanding space plans are a component of its vision for global dominance. And as it launched the Guowang and Qianfan constellations, China aims to entrench itself as a global power in space technology, a significant ranking in geopolitics. The power to dominate orbital space would potentially provide China with an advantage in such fields as military action, international communications, and space exploration. China's opacity in its space operations only serves to ratchet up the tension. In contrast to SpaceX, which offers minute details about rocket trajectories and disposal of space junk, China has been faulted for not releasing important information, for example, the trajectory of rocket stages or deorbiting plans for satellites. This secrecy ignites fears that China's space activities have the potential to create hazardous precedents, particularly when their rocket debris remains in orbit for much longer than necessary. In addition, the nation's lack of concern for international space norms introduces an added dimension of complexity, as other nations urge greater cooperation to provide safe and sustainable space exploration. All of this is going on while the United States attempts to maintain its leadership role in space. NASA keeps moving forward with its own plans, and the United States military is increasing its space activity. Whoever can properly balance satellite launches with debris management and long-term space sustainability will ultimately win the battle for control of space. With countries and private companies like SpaceX increasing their efforts, this war is just heating up. The structure of American space leadership is more fragmented. It involves multiple agencies, dozens of companies, and a rotating cast of political agendas. China's program, by contrast, is centralized, consistent, and long-term. That difference is starting to show. For decades, dominance in space was about being first. Now, it's about being durable. It's about who can operate efficiently, maintain control, and shape the rules that govern the final frontier. China's current trajectory suggests it isn't aiming to share that leadership. It's positioning itself to define it. So no, this isn't just a tech race, it's a strategic shift. The infrastructure China is building in orbit and beyond isn't just about pride or exploration. It's about leverage. It's about control. So here's the question. Does winning the space race mean being the first to Mars? Or does it mean setting up shop, establishing infrastructure, maintaining control, and staying? If it is about infrastructure, China is already leading in several key areas: satellite control, launch cadence, state-backed continuity, and deep space planning. They're not racing, they're building. If it's about innovation and ambition, the United States still has the upper hand. SpaceX alone outperforms entire national space agencies. American companies are developing space factories, asteroid mining tech, and commercial space hotels. And no one, literally no one, is building something as massive or game-changing as Starship. But here's the catch. Space is not about what you could do. It is about what you actually do. China does not dream. China executes. The United States dreams big, and then runs into lawsuits, delays, and budget fights. So, in this final stretch, the winner might not be the country with the coolest rockets. It might be the one with the patience, structure, and willpower to stay the course for 20, 30, or even 50 years. Because that's what this takes. One thing is certain. Space is no longer the final frontier. It is the next battlefield, marketplace, and civilization hub. So, the only real question now is, who is going to be left watching from the ground? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.